It's time for Lefties Losing It, and they're singing again, or miming in this case. Can someone let lefty politicians know you don't have to jump on every social media trend favoured by teenage girls? You really don't, Jasmine. Now to the leftist heartland of Portland, where a bunch of activists got together, donned neon leotards and held an aerobics class outside of an ICE detention facility as a show of resistance. Of course, there was a furry there. I wish I never knew what a furry was. Now, let's hear from world-class hypocrite Sunny Hostin, one of the co-hosts of The View. And wowee, what a difference a year makes. When Biden was in power last year, she didn't want to know about the Epstein list. Indeed, she warned anybody who would listen that just being named doesn't mean you're guilty of anything. But now that Trump is in power, well, she's changed her tune. She wants to let it rip.
People were dying for this information. There was some sort of list that everybody thought was going to come out, and who's on the list. What's important for us to note is we shouldn't be repeating names that are on the list, because just because your name has, not on the list, but in the documents, just because your name is on the documents doesn't mean that you have done anything criminally irresponsible or illegal or civilly irresponsible.
Or that you were a client.
Or that you were a client. These documents, as I read them, only reflect Epstein's sexual assaults of women and his sexual behavior. So I think that...
And Ghislaine also?
And Ghislaine. And so being named in this suit does not equate to being accused of wrongdoing. And I think that is extremely important, because conspiracy theorists seem to not understand or enjoy facts.
Yes.
These are the facts.
There is a list. Trump's name is on the logs, the passenger logs of Epstein's aircraft at least 7 times. That's already been made public. I mean, of course, Trump is denying any and all allegations, but all of that information is out there. Why not just put it to rest and say, release the list?
Because she didn't even want anyone on the list named last year. Now she's red hot to go. Now, when she's not being a world-class hypocrite, Sunny Hostin is indulging in her favourite pastime of race baiting. Her race obsessions have, well, been well documented. She bleats on endlessly about white supremacy and racism. But weirdly, she opts to live in an all-white neighbourhood. And here, Sunny again claims that America is built on racism and slavery.
This is a country based on racism and slavery, and founded in it. There is systemic racism
and misogyny.
And there are people that I've never met anyone that raises their hand and says, I am racist. However, there are people that seem to be able to look the other way when it comes to racism.
Oh, she's so tiresome and ill-informed, but it wouldn't be a Sunny Hostin rant if it didn't have a segue into some Trump derangement syndrome.
So you have a president who traffics in misogyny, who traffics in xenophobia, who traffics in sexism.
And won.
And he won. And won against a black woman. So don't tell me that this country is ready for a black woman. Don't tell me this country is ready
also,
for
let's
a
face
woman.
It, Hillary Clinton was one of the most qualified people.
Now, here is Michigan State Superintendent Sue Carnell, who can't seem to answer a simple question, a question so easy that a child could answer it with ease.
How many genders are there? How many genders are there?
Different people have different beliefs on that.
Well, you can believe all you want, but science says there's 2.
Now, I want to play you a little of Bill Maher's chat with actor and comic Patton Oswalt, who thinks he's very informed, very compassionate and intelligent. He thinks he's a political animal. Turns out he's a bubble-dwelling fool who hasn't even heard of the grooming gang scandal in the UK. Somehow he missed that huge scandal where thousands of young girls were sexually abused while authorities turned a blind eye because their attackers happened to be mainly members of the Pakistani community. And gosh, we can't go around enforcing the law and being seen as racist. Watch Patton squirm here as Bill Maher schools him.
You know, grooming, the grooming scandal.
No.
See, that's a big story.
This is in the UK.
Yes, that went on from like the 80s to the present, and it wasn't a...
You're talking about the royal family.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about Pakistani men who were immigrants, who were grooming poor, impoverished white girls mostly in these things and making them into prostitutes and sex slaves and like really nasty. And if you don't understand that, and that gender apartheid is the #1 issue that you woke people should be concerned with, but seem not to be, then right away we're not really seeing the world as the same way. And I think I'm seeing it much more clearly.
Yeah, but
gender apartheid should be your #1 issue. If you really care about oppression, like a lot. I'm talking about hundreds of millions of the world's women. And this is why England is having a big problem these days. Because in the interest of DEI, they are allowing practices that are so illiberal, which is the great irony. This is the least liberal thing you could be, is treating women as a second-class citizen.
He seems to think it's a big joke. As far as the grooming scandal goes, there were how many inquiries and trials stemming from that saga, and yet Patton has never heard of any of it. That bubble he exists in must be reinforced with titanium. Let's bring in documentary filmmaker and commentator Ami Horowitz. Ami, the ignorance there is profound, and from someone who is very political, very outspoken on all sorts of political and social issues, and yet he missed the UK's grooming gang scandal.
I mean, that wasn't even the biggest problem. Okay, look, I'm sure a lot of people on the left have never heard of this, right? Because the mainstream media really has been hiding that issue, shockingly. Look, that dumb mini-me didn't even know anything about Bill Maher's positions on these things. That's the crazy thing. Like, he's in the same world as Bill Maher, had no idea what Bill Maher's been saying for the last 5 to 7 years. Even more fascinating than the grooming scandal was the whole thing began, and I want to do a blow-by-blow because the whole, and I beg people,
yes, I've seen it.
Watch that, at least that portion. It's a 2-hour podcast. At least watch that like 15 minutes of it because it's so illuminating and fascinating. So he's just sitting there, and the whole thing began when he's talking about how great AOC is. And then Bill Maher responds with, well, if she gets deprogrammed, and you see his face, and he's like, what are you talking about? And Bill Maher's like, AOC is like a crazy leftist. And he goes, no, she's not. Like, he doesn't even register that AOC is on the far left. That's what's so crazy about it. And then it goes on. He's like, you know, they're talking about COVID. He's like, well, the Democratic Party is the party of science. And Bill Maher's like, no, they're not. Like, have you seen the whole thing about gender and how they refuse to acknowledge sex? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what? And he's like, well, if they do, it's because they're weaponizing it against trans people to scapegoat them. And Bill Maher, to his credit, he's like, what exactly are the trans people scapegoating for? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he couldn't come up with anything, obviously. The whole thing was crazy. Please go see it. But the best part was like, hey, no, I'm not in this leftist bubble. I read The Guardian. I kid you not. That was his response. Yeah, you know what? I read Pravda. Okay? Thank you very much.
But that's the Californian left for you. They're just so insulated from the real world and mainstream opinions across America. And that's why they get so shocked when Trump happens and he gets elected and wins quite easily. They don't know anybody who would possibly support him. Now, who knew Nicki Minaj would become the voice of reason and courage amongst celebrities? Today, she delivered a powerful speech at the United Nations to highlight the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. She started off by thanking President Donald Trump for bringing attention to the issue.
I would like to thank President Trump for prioritizing this issue and for his leadership on the global stage in calling for urgent action to defend Christians in Nigeria, to combat extremism, and to bring a stop to violence against those who simply want to exercise their natural right to freedom of religion or belief. I stand here as a proud New Yorker with a deep sense of gratitude that we live in a country where we can freely and safely worship God regardless of one's creed, background, or politics.
And Nicki Minaj spoke of the plight of Christians in Nigeria, thousands of whom have been slaughtered by Islamists.
Faith is under attack in way too many places. In Nigeria, Christians are being targeted, driven from their homes, and killed. Churches have been burned. Families have been torn apart, and entire communities live in fear constantly, simply because of how they pray.
Ami, I've got to say I'm impressed. I don't normally care for celebrity opinions, but she is bringing attention to something that is being actively ignored by so many. Even some of the reporting on this, they say alleged persecution of Christians, despite all the available evidence.
Yeah, look, count me in as a member of the paid member of the Barbs. What can I tell you? Nicki Minaj, wow, all I thought she did was sing, I'll take the win wherever I can get it. Look, it's really, it's interesting. Yes, like you said, the way this is being kind of framed by the media is just so fascinating. I read article after article about this, CNN talking about how this is really a nuanced and complex issue. Really, is it really that nuanced, right? Like they cannot make Muslims the bad guy. They just can't do it, no matter what the truth and the facts tell you, right? They cannot say that Christians are being persecuted by Muslim people. They have to say, like, well, by the way, Muslim people are being killed too, which is totally true, but they're being killed because they're not being Islamic enough of these radicals in Nigeria, right? They leave that part out conveniently, and so interesting, like, they're giving the number of Christians killed. They gave the lowest number possible cited, right? Like all the numbers are between, 30 and 60,000, 35 and 60,000 Christian civilians being killed, and they quoted a 20,000 number, which is an outlier number. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Even more fascinating is yet when they're talking about the number of civilians killed in Gaza, right, 30 to 50,000. Look, protests across the street, outrage across the globe. But when Christians are being murdered in Nigeria, or Islamic people being killed for not being Islamic enough, total quiet. Then it becomes complex and nuanced. I don't see any encampments going on, right? Do you? I didn't. Look, the left, they don't care about black people being killed, I guess. They only care about Palestinians when they be killed by Jews. I don't know what to tell you. That's what I see from those numbers.
Well, I've got to say, Nicki Minaj was a lot more eloquent than Cardi B. Remember, she spoke at a Kamala rally. Did not go well. Now, there was a lot of pomp and ceremony at the White House for the state visit of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Let's have a look at President Trump greeting the Crown Prince. And they had fruitful discussions with the Crown Prince announcing a massive boost to investment in the US.
We believe in what you're doing, Mr. President, really creating a lot of good things and good foundation to create more economic growth, more business in America. And it will also your work for the world peace. I believe, Mr. President, today and tomorrow we're going to announce that we are going to increase that $600 billion to almost $1 trillion of investment, real investment and real opportunity by details in many areas. And the agreement that we are signing today in many areas in technology, in AI.
Army, $600 billion to $1 trillion in new investment. The US-Saudi relationship is just, it's strengthening further.
Yeah, $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there. Soon we're talking about real money, Rita. Look, okay, let me start with stuff I didn't love, and then we'll go to the stuff that I love, right? Not a big fan of the Saudis getting F-35s. I got to tell you, I don't like Arabs having that kind of technology, particularly with technology transfers. Don't really look. I like the move they're going in. Don't totally trust them at this point. Certainly, a fan of the Abraham Accords. I'll get that in a second. And look, didn't love also the whole when they brought up Khashoggi, which is a legitimate question to ask. The Saudi security service literally dismembered a man, okay, and put him in a suitcase to get rid of him. Not a huge fan of that, and didn't like when Trump was like, well, some people didn't like the guy. Fine, okay, I get it. Now, having said that, finally, look, what do we have with 4 years of Biden? We had him pushing the Saudis. Oh, this is real. As much as I don't trust the Saudis, this is realpolitik at its finest, okay? You deal with the people who are there. And him pushing the Saudis away for years, how the Saudis pivot toward who? Not England, not France. They pivoted toward the other powers in the world. They pivoted toward China. They pivoted toward Russia. That's not good for the United States. That is not good for peace around the world. They even started flirting with engagement with Iran because they were afraid of being left out in the cold with the Biden administration poo-pooing them and pushing them off to the side. Okay, that's the way we work. This is the reality of politics. Having them join the Abraham Accords, which is clearly the direction we're going in, is an absolute game changer for the Middle East. Okay, the Abraham Accord was big enough as it is. And let's be honest, the Gulf states would not have signed up without Saudi assent. But the Saudis have actually put their name on normalization with the state of Israel is something massive, and also puts the Palestinians in a difficult position and will lead toward eventual peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis, okay? Instead of what we had during the Biden administration, the Houthis continuing to bomb all across the Middle East because they were out of control because he would not support the Saudis in his war against the Houthis. That's the situation we find ourselves in. So kudos to the president to having him come to the White House, and kudos to pushing forward with the Abraham Accords.
And there was a sign that relations between Elon Musk and President Trump have improved. Musk was at the White House dinner for the Crown Prince. Of course, they came together after that little tiff they had at Charlie Kirk's funeral in Phoenix, and it seems like things are improving there. Now, the House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly to force the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files. Several of Epstein's survivors were present in the House chamber during the vote. There were cheers when the resolution passed. Army, the Democrats pushed for this after sitting on the report for how long? It's just fascinating to see this turnaround where they suddenly, this is the number one issue for them.
Yeah, it really is interesting. Look, from a tactical perspective, I think Trump should have done this earlier, but he feels like kind of pressured into it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. The House voted for this bill to release all the information. Then the Senate did. It's going to go on to Trump's desk, and he will sign it. And like Trump said, he's like, look, this is more of a you problem than a me problem, right? This is more of a Democratic problem than a Republican problem. And, how do we know that? Well, this is not a bigger story out of Republican conservative media, I don't understand. But a Democratic representative, right, for the Virgin Islands was literally texting with Epstein during the hearing when she was questioning Michael Cohen. Okay, she was taking directions from Epstein. It's unbelievable. This isn't a bigger issue on CNN and MSNBC now. Okay, it is crazy. And her defense was, y'all don't know me. Yeah, we do. We do. Okay. How do I know this is not an issue for Trump, that Trump is not involved in this at all? We know it. Why? Because Biden had all this information. If Trump was in it, you don't think he would have released it? Of course he would have. That's why this is not a Trump issue, okay? I think tactically he made a mistake not doing this, but at the end of the day, it's really going to be a non-issue. It's the Russia thing all over again. I think the fascinating part is these strange bedfellows, right? With the right, the hard right and the left. And you see Steve Bannon, who was, by the way, also a friend of Epstein, not just a friend, but he was helping Epstein. Epstein was emailing with him on what to do. He was advising him on how to get the PR issues he had. Why is Steve Bannon making this issue? Because he hates Donald Trump, hates his policies. The whole thing with Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? She's now, she was on The View. Jimmy Kimmel loved her. Did you hear Jamie Raskin said he wants her to be part of the Democratic Party? What is happening? It's all crazy. It's out of control.
You're so right that 2019 was when Epstein was texting with a Democrat during a congressional hearing, pretty much giving instructions, it looked like. And we had the likes of Hakeem Jeffries soliciting money from Epstein, who was a prolific Democrat donor. And not enough is said about that. He was a Democrat and he put his money where his beliefs were. It's going to be fascinating what's there, but I think people do have to be careful because there will be names that have done nothing wrong, that have absolutely no wrongdoing. And if you go accusing them of being sex offenders or pedophiles, you're probably going to get some defamation lawsuits coming your way. So I think people just need to be a little bit rational here and a little bit measured when this list is released, Army. Army, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time.